I'm sitting here with Eric Walker and Adam Langley. You're the treasurer of the NASDRA Georgia region. You're the president-elect. Did I get your title right,
Yes,
Mr. President?
current vice president.
Current vice president, moving on up in the world. Huh?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
so they say.
The trajectory. Right. So first off, the plan that we went into today's trial didn't really pan out like we were originally planning on. We got to stick to our plan a little bit better in the future, Adam, because the whole idea was you were supposed to win your trial, and me and Eric were supposed to battle it out on the amateur finals today.
That's right.
And I don't think any of us succeeded.
No, came up a little short.
So go ahead and introduce yourself, Adam, a little bit about you, where you live, kind of how long you've been doing this NASTRA game, and then, Eric, we're going to kind of bring you into the fold.
All right.
All right, Adam Langley from Cordell, Georgia, happily married, 4 kids ranging from 28 to 12. One out of college, one playing ball at the highest level, and one soccer player. And my outdoorsman is my youngest. She stays outside all the time. NASTRA came into my life I believe it was the 1st of November is when I actually attended my first trial.
So you haven't been doing this very long.
Not long at all. And fell in love with the sport itself, the bird dogs, and the game inside of bird dogs. That's NASTRA. It's there's a chess match kind of that goes on the field once you understand it, and it's just a lot of fun and very competitive. You've got to do it in the right way and handle it the right way, and be a sportsman about it all. But it's very competitive.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get into that because there's a lot of elements competitive, but also it's, to your point, there's a strategy behind it. And while it's competitive, everybody here seems to want to help everybody, at least behind the line.
Correct. Correct. And then you've got the element of the dog, and you want to do what's right during the brace. That's what we call the actual running of the trial. Is you have braces inside the trial, and you want to be competitive and do the things that it takes to win. But I think there's a fine line that you have to make sure that you are doing. You're not pushing your dog over the edge and instilling bad habits. And I was a victim of that last year. I had very young dogs. I came out here and pushed them too hard in the beginning, and brought in some bad habits that I spent all the off season, summertime, trying to correct.
Right. And I want to explore that, but save that thought for a second. Eric, let's hear a little bit about you and when you came into NASTRA and what brought you into this world.
So I've been doing this, I think, 3 years now, but I live in Griffin, Georgia, and luckily the trial grounds are just a couple miles from my house. But I'd had bird dogs a while back, and I got back into them, I guess, 5 years ago, and started doing NAVDA, and that's fine. But we don't have a whole lot of wild birds here to hunt, so I was looking for something else to do with my dog, basically during hunting season, and came across NASTRA, and I'm gonna probably mix those up all the time. They're too close. But anyway, and just kind of got started in that, and then you get a couple placements under your belt, and you get sucked in, and you're
It doesn't take much to hook you.
yeah, here almost every weekend.
Yeah, it seems like all you have to do is kind of dip your toes in the water. You have a little bit of fun. You get sucked into that competitive just moment. You're in the
Sure.
zone, and then next thing you know, it's like, man, if this was in my backyard and closer to home, there'd probably be issues because it is a lot of fun. I want to talk about, with you being newer to this, but as heavily involved as you are, I want to go back to when you first entered. Somebody listening to this that maybe has no idea about NASTRA, let's start off with the actual rules to set up the field, like how we're actually running this brace, and then I want to start getting into the strategy as well as the lessons learned that you're starting to touch on.
Sure. So the braces are 30 minutes long. They're 2 dogs, 2 handlers, and 2 judges. Our judges ride 4-wheelers, and they're to keep up with the dogs. A good judge never loses sight of their dog. That's a phrase that I've seen tossed around in publications in NASTRA. And they place, other than the first brace of each trial, there's 6 birds that are placed out in the field. And every brace after that, a full trial is 16 braces. And we normally run simultaneously 2 fields, a field A and a field B. And you have 30 minutes to go out and find the birds that have been placed in that field. You you're judged on the find, you're judged on the retrieve, you're judged on the ground cover, you're judged on the obedience of the dog, and backing. Backing is a caveat. I have both my dogs aren't very well at backing right now.
We've had a few chats about how to start that training.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I've enjoyed those chats. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. The 2 events that you have attended, and the conversations that we've had long into the night. I've enjoyed. A little bit harder to get up the next morning, but I've enjoyed the chats.
There seems to be a pattern with me everywhere I go. Is I end up in a corner with a bunch of dog nerds.
Sure.
Talking dogs.
Sure.
Great catalyst for the podcast, but it's. Eric, did we miss anything on the actual setup? Of
5 birds on each brace after the first one.
Yeah, the six birds on the first brace, 5 after that.
And so you got the 30-minute brace. You got 2 dogs out there in the field with 2 handlers, and each handler has their own judge.
Right.
So you have a minimum of 4 people in the field. Sometimes you can have a mentor. Sometimes if there's a handicap or something, you can have another gunner. But minimum of 4 people, 2 dogs in the field. And this is where, something that you hear about NASTRA along with a lot of other trial circuits or organizations when you get into this. And, some people like the thought of competition, other people don't. I was kind of hesitant to where I'm a pretty competitive person. I knew if I got wrapped up in it, I might, take it a little serious. But at least in general speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, the vast majority of these trials isn't really like eliminate your brace mate. It's really
Right.
you're just going out to get the highest score. There just happens to be another dog in the field. So
Correct.
it's not really a one-on-one thing. It's still you against the field. Now, then you eventually get to the big tournaments where like this one right here was the regional.
It's like our
And
state championship.
yeah, so it's like you have a pre-trial, and then there's a cut after that, and then it's beat your brace mate, kind of picture a bracket-style tournament to where it doesn't matter your score, you just go out and you have to beat your brace. So it's like it depends on the trial, and I think that's what does confuse some people on the outskirts looking in, is like they think that it's handler and dog against handler and dog, and I guess you could kind of paint it as that picture, but it's really still you against the field. You're just out there trying to get the best score that you can get.
Correct. And to go back to how getting involved with NASTRA, we have an amateur program, something here in the Georgia region that we've really focused on the past 12 months, and bringing in new members and bringing that understanding of what NASTRA is, the rules, and you can make it as competitive as you want to make it. I am a competitive person. I played high school sports, enjoyed the competitiveness that came with high school sports. But you can be as competitive as you want to be. You can do it at any level that you want to. It's your goals and what you set for you and your dog in the game. It's like-minded people that enjoy bird dogs coming together and extending the season of bird hunting and getting to know. The guys, Eric and a couple others in the group, they go out west hunting. I've never gone out west bird hunting, and I really want to do that. And having that avenue, and there's regions all over the United States. If you're a NASTRA member, you can run your dogs in other regions. Iowa, I think is a very, talking to some of the judges that have judged out there, it's a beautiful place. It's, something that I look forward to when my wife and I retire, and being able to travel the country and maybe go to some of the trials that are in other parts of the country. So that there's
the networking opportunity.
Absolutely.
And Eric, you're familiar with this with NABDA. I talk about one of the biggest values of an organization such as NABDA is the networking, and it sounds like, from afar, I'm brand new within NASTRA, but it seems like it's, similar in regards to regions. You guys call it regions, NABDA calls it chapters, but
I think the biggest difference is like you can go run your test your dog at any chapter, and with NASTRA you can pretty much run your dog at every region. It's just when it comes to the regional, the state championship, that's where you that's where the dividing line is on that.
you
So
got to do it at home then, pretty much.
basically, there's some gray area on that. And there's like since you're not in the Georgia region, but since you got your points here, you were able to run. So it's too nuanced to go into here, but yeah,
And probably not
but
really relevant.
yeah,
Right.
So, we laid out kind of how a trial is formed. Let's start talking about how those points come about. You mentioned, okay, you get points for fines, retrieves, obedience, ground cover, and getting it back. Eric, you're a judge, so why don't you take this one? Tell me like what a judge is actually looking at here, because when people hear fines and the word style, they might get a little intimidated, especially if they have like a more esoteric breed, right?
yeah.
So kind of tell me through the judge's eyes what you're looking for in each one of those categories.
Yeah, I mean, you're. We'll start with the fine. You're not. I mean, the judge is supposed to be basically breed blind. I mean, you know certain dogs are going to look certain ways, but a lot of it has to do with how hard the dog hits the point. Do they stop? Do they stand there? Do they take pressure from another dog without moving? Do they road in? Do they stop when they get to first scent? Um, do they take steps? I mean, do they take out the bird? Then I mean, you don't get credit
Pretty much
then.
all the million different scenarios that can
Right.
unfold.
Right, and then so there's a scoring range, but I mean, you've kind of learned it, but most of your scores fall within 40 points of each other on the score sheet. So I mean, unless you've got something real bad or real good, there's just kind of a range that
Like 70s, 80s, that's pretty
yeah,
common. We had a 93 fine today that got a couple eyebrows raised. And
yeah,
then, if you just get a dog that just nonchalantly, just like, oh, hey, a bird here. And it's like, you know, pretty lackluster, pretty slow.
yeah.
Like, you're going to get credit for the fine, but you're obviously not getting a 90
Right.
on that one.
Right. And retrieves are the same way. They're in that scoring range, but basically, I mean, you want the dog to go pick it up, bring it back to you as quick as you can. If you were to have the dog miss the mark and you give them some hand signals, get a blind retrieve, you can get extra points for that. Um, if you got a water retrieve, we don't really have any opportunities for that in Georgia, but some regions they do have some ponds on their
Tell me what affects like, if we don't have the water, but you want to, get a higher retrieve. Is it distance? Is it, maybe the dog got a horrible mark but still comes away with it? Can you like cast them? Do you get extra points for any of
Yeah,
that stuff?
you get if you can kind of work them to it, you get extra points for that. But yeah, if the dog, I mean, if they miss the mark, if they find it on their own, and/or you use hand signals to get them there, then that'll get you the extra points. What was the first part of what you asked? Or
Oh, just, I mean, how else can you extend that retrieve drive? Or
I
the
mean, and
retrieve
a
points,
long
not drive.
retrieve if the bird gets out there a good ways and they bring it back to
You
you.
wing it and it just sails.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you miss the bird, if you stand still and the dog goes and retrieves the bird goes down in the field and they retrieve it even out of bounds. We had a funny. He was judging my dog last year, and I missed the bird. The bird flew out of bounds into some trees, and he was gone a couple minutes. And I took a step, and right as I took a step, he reappeared with a bird in his mouth. And if I would have stood still, I
You
would
would
have
have
gotten
gotten a
credit for
retrieve.
the retrieve. Yeah, and we both. It was funny.
Yeah, and an important distinguishment, because of my second trial, I still unfamiliar with all the nuance and the rules and whatever, and I didn't realize if you take a step, then all of a sudden you don't get
Correct.
the opportunity
Yeah.
for the retrieve. So that's an important thing. Is you shoot the bird, you have to stay there. Like, I don't even think you can move out of cover. Maybe you can ask a
You have
judge.
to ask the judge if you can move out.
Okay, so you can, but you have to ask and you
Yeah.
get permission. And then the obedience, when people hear obedience, especially my NAVDA listeners, they're picturing some good high quality obedience, and it's not like we're going out there in a brace. There's not like heel stakes or something set up, so there's really not a clear opportunity for obedience. But there are certain things that you guys are looking at throughout the course of the half hour to where recall, or is the dog staying with you, what are you really looking at or picking apart or adding points or taking points
Yeah,
away?
basically, I mean, how many times you call your dog versus how many. I mean, that's the biggest, I would say, relevant. I don't know, issue is the right word, but factor in the. But a lot of it, you can get extra points if you call your dog out of bounds. If your dog uh, is steadier than required, you can get extra obedience points for that.
What about the retrieve? So like the handoff. I mean, you've seen me a number of times run already. Like, I'm still Rachel's coming in all the way to heel and a good handoff. Like I'm still requiring that. Does that go to obedience or retrieve score?
That would go to retrieve most likely. I mean, it can kind of teeter or filter in and may affect your obedience a little bit, but mostly that's going to be in retrieve.
All right. And then backing is pretty self explanatory. I think you get a higher score if it's like further back. I'm
Right.
assuming staunchness, like how staunch are they? Does it look like they're actually pointing, or is it just they're stopping like
Yeah.
because they have to,
Because you
right?
told them, whoa, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And let's touch on whoa. Are you allowed to use whoa? There's no e-collars allowed in these trials, but what about giving your dogs commands and whoa
Yeah,
and
it's
all that
totally
stuff?
different from NAVDA for commands. You can give your dog way more commands just to be a 1,000 foot view. But the biggest thing is once your dog is on point and point has been called, you can whoa your dog. So, I mean, the more times you say whoa, your obedience score or your fine score may go down a little bit. But the you can whoa your dog. Uh, if you were to whoa your dog into a back, you do not get credit for the back. Um,
And so I think it's important to note that obedience, ground, and blind, or backing, not blind. I don't know why I keep wanting to say blind, but it's important to note that those are accrued through the entire brace. You get one score for each one of those three through the entire brace. Meanwhile, you can, every bird you find, and then every retrieve on each one of those birds. That's really how you stack your points up in this, to where obedience, ground, and backing plays a part, as we saw today, and we're going to get to the trials today. But it's still most importantly go find birds and shoot birds,
right.
right? Like that is, I mean, Rachel had a great run this afternoon. Three birds, three finds, a back, high obedience, great ground coverage score, and she still lost. Dude got a 4 and a 4, right? And while her scores trumped his on all those other three categories, it's tough to overcome an additional bird from the
Right.
brace mate. And I think that's why it's so, when most people assume that it's brace mate and dog versus dog, I think that's where that comes from. But it's still important to note that like your main mission out there is to go find birds and
Yes,
put
very
them in
much
the
so.
vest,
Yeah.
which is reminiscent or reflective of hunting, right?
Right. I mean, you can have the most or the best trained dog in the world, but if it only goes out there and finds one bird, then you're not going to be competitive.
Correct.
So
Yeah. Now, within one of those finds and retrieves, it's funny is like I'm curious like what goes into those scores, what we just talked about, and I think it was Stan at the last trial I was at. He let it slip that like his find score will go up if the longer the dog holds point, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, challenge accepted, right? And so instead of my dog going on point and I'm hightailing it over to her like a lot of people are, I'm just going at my pace and I'm just gonna milk this and just be like, not rush it, because I know Rachel is gonna hold that point in steadiness.
Sure.
But you can figure out, this goes into the strategy you were talking about, is do you want to try and maximize as many points in a specific find, or is it more prudent to just go knock out that bird and move on to the next one, right? Like what.
I think that goes those. It's where this is where the strategy of the game comes into is how many birds have you found, how many birds has your brace mate found? Where is your brace mate in relation to where you are in the field? So the rule of thumb is, and it doesn't have to be this way, but the rule of thumb is that you cut a field into 4 quadrants. The bird handler puts a bird in one of those 4 quadrants. A bird in each one of those 4 quadrants, and there's a middle bird that is placed, and where the shape of the field, where you have found a bird, where your brace mates has or has not found a bird, where they're positioned in that field, kind of dictates where you should go with your dog to cut that dog off or follow along with that dog. It just all depends. Very different scenarios, and you have to be cognizant of where your brace mate is in the field, what your brace mate has done, and it kind of goes into your strategy of what you're going to do next with your dog after the find that you've just had.
Yeah, because you can elect to go with that dog and other handler or break apart from them. And obviously, it's like today, I found myself, I wasn't really with the other dog very much, but I'm always keeping an eye out in case that other dog went on point, and then I can go get some backing points
Sure.
real
Right.
quick
Sure.
to where it's like just because the other dog finds another bird before you, still take advantage of the opportunity because you can essentially negate that dog's find with your one backing score.
Right.
But if that dog gets a clean retrieve, obviously it's still ahead, but that still helps you, in the long run in the bigger picture. And let's talk about the dogs in line of the strategy because I think a lot of people would assume the bigger running dog that clears the giant field. Like, how big are these fields first? Is there a requirement or minimum acreage?
I don't know if there's a requirement. I think about 30 acres is ideal. I think I'm not sure about the one run. I've measured these up near the clubhouse. They're about 25 to 30, somewhere in there.
So
So,
we're not talking like a super large area, but not a small area
right.
either. So you do want a dog that covers ground, but it's very doable in a half an hour to where you're doing multiple laps. Like if you're walking the whole time, and so when we're talking about the dogs and the characteristics of the dogs that you can find success or at least be competitive in some way, shape, or form, I think a lot of people would automatically assume you need that dog that goes, that motor. But from at least my perspective in the few trials that I've been to, that's not necessarily true. I mean, it helps. I mean, obviously, you need a dog with a little bit of gas in its tank, but I've also seen a couple dogs to where they're a little closer working and they find success because, to your point, you have one bird in each little section and then a middle bird. While that one dog that goes straight to the back, you can be working the front quarters, right? And so it seems to me like if you have a competent dog and it's well trained and efficient with the right conditions and a little bit of luck, anybody and any dog can be competitive in this format.
Exactly, yeah. And the sitting conditions will change throughout the day and the season. And so sometimes the bigger running dogs do better on the days where sitting conditions are better. When sitting conditions aren't as good, a lot of times the closer, more methodical dogs will do better, just because they're moving a little slower.
Yeah. And so anybody listening to this, if you have that dog that, just for whatever reason out in the field, it still doesn't want to go over 40, 50 yards, you can still come do this.
Sure.
You might get a few extra steps in comparative to other people. But also we've seen and I've heard what I find fascinating, what I love about going to different organizations and trials and getting to meet new people is you get to hear all of the cool stories of that organization and like what people think it like really stands out throughout the years of them doing this. So you hear a lot about like dogs that will go and clear the field essentially. I think Adam, you were talking about this last night where there was some legendary dog that would just run the entire field and just check off each bird and then go back and handle each bird.
I think that was Eric
Yeah,
bringing
that was
story.
Okay.
No one's last bullet. The most famous Brittany that I've ever heard of. That's
how how realistic is that? Because you hear all the time about stuff that dogs do that people are like, "Oh, this makes a dog like how." Let's be
if
honest.
if I just read that on the internet, I wouldn't believe a minute of it. But one of the judges that's here today, he said he actually saw it himself, and so I do have some belief in it.
So tell the story for the listeners. Like, tell it what you were
Okay,
telling me last
so
night.
at the breakaway, Buddy was his call name. He would run the field, and he would tick his head every time he passed a bird. He would find all 5 birds or however many there was, and he would keep an eye on the other dog the whole time. And whenever he saw the other dog heading towards the bird, he would run to that bird and cut the other dog off and point that bird before that dog got to it. And I think he was a 32-time NASTRA champion. I don't think there'll be
Wow.
any other dog to probably break
Jeez.
that record. Maybe one day, but
Let's add context to national champion. What does that mean? How do you get a national championship? Because somebody listening to this, myself included, I'm like, all right, 32 national champions. Like, I would assume that a national champion is something you can do like once a year. So, like, how do you end up with 32
well, I
national
don't think it was.
championships?
So there's different championships. He had 32 NASTRA championships. He there's national trials, there's the regional trials, the end of the year trial basically, and then there's a way with points you can get a championship. So the
So you can get some by winning an actual trial, and then some is just points accrued over a season, a lifetime.
lifetime,
Okay.
yeah. So like one of my oldest dog, he's like 2 points away from getting a championship. So it's just something you kind of plug away at. It's kind of like points in a NASCAR race, trying to keep you coming back. But
And how do you accrue those points?
by getting placements. So as long as it depends on how many dogs are in the trial. But if the trial's full, you'll get
So 16 dogs.
16 dogs. You'll get 4 points for getting first place, and then it ticks down for each placement below that. If the trial is not as full, you may not get as many points. But then I think it's 18 points, and 9 of those have to be first place points to get a championship.
Okay. So you can't just like limp in with a bunch of third place wins.
No, you've got basically got to get half of them to have to be first place points.
One thing that I learned is, in kind of the same spirit of that is like you have to, at least some of these have to be first place points. Like you guys are cognizant of like if you're going to win, you have to prove all of the qualities. So like in a regional championship such as today or in the final hour, the dog that wins has to have had a back score at least at some point during the trial, or else the next dog gets the win instead of the dog that actually won it, right?
Right. Yep.
And I like that because it's like, okay, that's part of the game here. Is you guys can't just have a Nolan's last bullet or whatever the dog's name was, not to disrespect the last bullet here, but you can't just have a dog just do that without any kind of training for backing. It's like, no, it's level ground. Like you can be a stud at all this, but to really win, you still have to be able to do what all of the other dogs are supposed to be doing as well.
Right. Right.
And so it's kind of the same thing as like y'all think about some of the requirements to where it's just like you can't really game the system. I mean, I'm sure there's some loopholes and there's plenty of people that have been doing this long enough that kind of know some of the ins and outs, but it seems like y'all are doing the best to set it up to where it doesn't give other people unfair advantages.
The weekend trials at your local regional club, I guess by way to put it, you're not. There's not a whole lot at stake. It's just a bunch of guys out there mostly having a good time. When you get your national trials, which I think we started talking about that earlier and we didn't finish, but things are a little more serious. There may be a little more gameplay in there, but I mean, like I've never run my dog in one. I've been doing this for 4 years. I mean, it's one of those things that not everybody does. You can, but it's just.
So what's the difference? Is it worth more points or just prestigious?
It's more prestigious. I mean, you're running against people from all over the country.
So competition level probably goes up.
It does. And
There's 4
it's 4 or 5 and
national trials, and there's different requirements to get in those trials. There's different, like there's one that's called Dog of the Year, and then you have the QI, and then there's the Endurance,
and then the Trial of Champions. And
so y'all have like different themed trials,
right.
pretty much.
And they're different parts of the country.
Okay.
And NASTRA's home base is in Indiana, so several of the trials are there, which is kind of middle of the country for most people, but and then they have some in the they have one usually in the southeast and some in the north and the west.
And it also this sport goes into you have to do your job as a handler and as a marksman. Your your overall score is penalized when you miss a bird. I missed a bird today. I I watched braces before my brace. I knew that there was a marked bird. We call a marked bird a bird in the field. I saw it flushed and went into another area. I knew that he was there or the bird was there. And I brought my dog into that area and found the bird. He pointed the bird. My dog was on one side of a large oak tree. The bird was on the other side of the oak tree. And when I went in to flush the bird, it ran around the other side of the tree, and I had to shoot through limbs. And when I ended up missing the bird, and because of that, I didn't get I got a slash as we call it, and it was no points. In that brace as well, my male dog did not back. And if I would have done my job of shooting the bird, and he would have completed his job of performing a back, I probably would have been in first place on that field today. But because we both didn't do our jobs,
Neither of y'all get a steak dinner.
that's right.
Eating
little,
hamburger.
little hamburger and hot dog.
Well, and I mean that's important to note to where like you can win or lose this based on your own actions and decisions or the dog. So it really does go. It is a team effort to where like fast forward to today's trial, Rachel. We go out there. She had a really good run to start this morning. She made the cut going into the beat your brace mate. I keep wanting to call it an elimination challenge almost, a runoff or whatever. Uh, but then that the second run, she went out there and it was that run I described earlier where it was a really competitive, clean run. But I was fine with it because I didn't screw anything up. Rachel didn't screw anything up. The other handler and dog just
Found an extra
found
bird.
an extra bird. And like you can go out there and do everything right. But it was a fun run. It was exciting. You know, Eric was out there mentoring me again.
We need to talk about the mentor program.
Exactly, and that's where I
Absolutely.
was
Yeah.
headed because
Okay.
Adam was my mentor for my first run, while you were the judge on my first run, and so like that's where I was exactly heading. But the it's okay to go out there and have a run like that, and you still come away unsuccessful, but it was clean. It's like, what else do you want? It's like, that was a good time, right? It's just, I have a 10-year-old dog, and this dude had an awesome little 1.5-year-old setter who had a little bit more gas in the tank than Rachel when it got that humid. But at the end of the day, you ran today. I want to get to the mentor program, but I also want to specify that you can have dogs if you are going out and your brace mate is taking out birds, poor sending conditions, it's raining, bad conditions like what we had today, that dog will get picked up and then a buy dog comes in. So, you hear in some formats in different organizations when they have to have a brace mate in the field with them, some people will say that they were unsuccessful because their brace mate, poor dog work.
Hmm.
Here, it's like y'all give everybody a window and you get an opportunity, but you catch that second bird, you're out, and they're bringing in a buy dog to finish the run so that it's still apples to apples and everybody's getting competitive. Again, it goes back to nobody gets that competitive advantage.
Yeah, and it's like if a dog were to go out of bounds for more than 10 minutes, they're disqualified, and you have to bring in a buy dog because basically you're giving the other dog the field if your dog's hanging out in the woods the whole time. So
10 minutes. So like these dogs will go out in the woods for 10 minutes and be gone. I mean, I believe you,
yeah,
but like it's still just you're
yeah.
entering
Sometimes they can get they can chase a bird or something, and then find a lot of times there's safety birds in the woods, and so. And then people have found their dog on point in the woods. So I mean, there's a lot of scenarios that can happen. We talked about it before. A lot of these dogs are used to hunting in the woods, so they think they're supposed to be in there. But that is one part of this game is you got to be able to keep your dog in the field where.
right.
Um,
And that's one of the million scenarios that can play out. And that's why it can be intimidating when you're coming to your first trial. You've never done this. Heck, my first trial that I've ever attended and been a part of, I was the first runner. So like I came to this thinking like, oh well, I'll watch a couple braces, I'll kind of get a feel for it. Nah, I just got thrown out there immediately.
Right.
But it was cool because at the end of the day, it's this bird dog stuff. Like we're gonna go find birds, I'm gonna shoot birds. It's pretty simple. But you guys do have the little mentor program or whatever. It's not one designated person for eternity mentoring, but an experienced member will walk with you to help guide you on any of those random scenarios that can kind of unfold
Sure.
and be uncomfortable for a new person.
Sure.
Exactly. And you can also walk with an experienced person before you go. That way you can kind of get a feel for how things go before you go out there with your dog.
And then, probably judge dependent and the, vehicle that they're using dependent, but like I was able to hop in the side by side with Stan for a couple braces, so I'm riding with a judge watching the dog work. And so you can, what I'm getting at is you can really kind of jump in, download all the information real quick, and get comfortable really quick in this game. It's not this really huge giant bar to leap over.
No.
Right, and now there's some nuances to the rules, but the rules are basically like you said. They're fairly simple. Safeties, there can be some. That's one of the things that kind of caught me when I first started, especially where we're running here today in ball ground, because the fields are fenced in, and so you can call a safety if the bird flies towards the boundary because your dog can't go over the fence.
And we're not talking about a bird flushing in the middle of the field and the
No.
fence is 200 yards off.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody's tried it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean a lot of times, they may plant a bird 20 to 50 yards from the fence or so. It gets up and flies towards the fence. Then you can, and sometimes they won't be flying towards the fence, and you take a shot and they'll hook towards the fence. So it's just you got to kind of learn the ins and outs of it, but it's not a steep learning curve,
No,
like you
no,
said.
you learn it real quick. I mean, while there are a million scenarios that unfold, they're all kind of within the same element. So, I want to take it to where you were getting at earlier. The lessons learned, the hurdles coming into this as a handler, a dog trainer, how to be competitive, both good and bad. Let's just kind of jump in, tips, learning experiences. Like let's just jump into them.
Learning experiences. Um, just understanding the rules. It's in my nature. It's in my DNA that when I do something, I do it with everything. And I I was not intimidated. I'm not that type of person. I wasn't intimidated by the rules. I wanted to get out and do this. When I learned that it was you flushed the bird and shot the bird and your dog brought the bird back, it really resonated with me because it was the closest field trial organization that I found that was as close to a hunting scenario. And I liked the fact that the dog was asked, and you were asked to shoot the bird or tasked with shooting the bird, and your dog is tasked with bringing the bird back, in a proper manner. So the first several trials that I went on, I didn't understand the rules 100%. I did take advantage of the mentor program, but there were some instances that I got myself into that if I would have understood the rules, the safety, the bird, if you flush the bird and it goes towards the competitor or your brace mate or the judge or the gallery, or if there's a home adjacent to the property that we're using, those are safety zones, and there's advantages to utilizing those when you go in to flush the bird. If you can flush the bird in a direction that kind of aids in being able to call safety. I mean, it's the game, and no, it's not 100% just good dog work, and there are ways of taking advantage of the system.
Oh yeah.
To gain placement and all that. But at the end of the day, you have to do your job and your dog has to do its job, or you've got to find birds like we've outlined earlier in this conversation, and your dog has to be steady. It has to stay steady until the bird moves or is flushed. There's people that bring dogs out that's steady to wing and flush, or steady to shot. You know, it's your preference on how you want to handle your dog. Um, you can, you know, there's you talk to some of the old guard of the guys that've been doing it forever, and they'll tell you, no, you want your dog to be steady, just to the flush, and so it can retrieve the bird in a quicker manner. It doesn't lose sight of the bird. But there's been scenarios where if my dog, I brought dogs out to this game that were steady to wing and shot, and I allowed them because I wanted to win. I allowed them to get away with some things, which taught bad behaviors, and it actually pushed my youngest dog into some really bad behaviors where he started picking birds up. He started creeping in on birds, and when I did not train my dog myself, I had it sent to a trainer, and it was his encouragement that got me involved in field trialing. He said I had some good dogs and that I ought to look into field trialing. He gave me a great product, and a product that I could build upon, and it would have been a wonderful dog that I could go out west like y'all do and perform, you know, the task that type of hunting requires. And I pushed him into bad habits because of my competitiveness, and I thought he could handle it. And then I realized when it was too late, oh man,
Back off.
I've really undone all the good training that my dog received. And I spent the whole off season, and he didn't see a bird. It was voice commands. It was the yard work. It was the 10, 15 minutes a day or 30 minutes in a field.
Foundations.
Foundation, changing direction on whistle or my voice. He'll do both, and my female will do both. But I just worked on the basics, woeing in the yard, placing. Anytime I asked him to do just a simple command, you know, I made sure that he did that. And
So I wanna emphasize this and kind of summarize it a little bit to where you didn't train your dog initially. You sent it out. Guy said, "Hey, you got some quality dogs here. You might want to entertain this." And because you wanted to find success in this game, because back to our previous point, it hooks you. It's a lot of fun. You know, you don't want to come do this on every weekend and not be successful. But you can, just like we talk about in a line of any other field trial or hunt test, you can go too fast too soon.
yep,
Yep.
And because you were trying to, let's be honest, probably quote unquote cut corners to try and win, you didn't really find success until you went back to the basics and the foundations of
correct.
the same thing that we preach on every single one of these podcast episodes is the answer's not out there in the tall grass, it's right here in the short grass. And it just emphasizes to where, Eric, you and I have had a few conversations about this, to where, like, can efficient dog work overcome the stigma of losing time in this game? I haven't found success in this. I've barely dipped my toes in this. I think from watching this, I think there's a place for that full on steady dog. I think that efficiency overall would overcome whatever imbalance in lost time out there in the field. It's just understanding the game and, again, having a little bit of luck on your side. I think that I see to where, like, somebody that just went and, maybe put a VC on or finish their AKC hunt test, and they're just looking for some fun to do, but they don't want to dirty their dog back up, quote unquote. You can still come out here and be competitive, in my opinion.
Well, it's putting into play everything that you have worked with your dog on. It's not just and I'm not throwing shade at any other organization or anything, but it's actually, you're putting to test everything that you have trained your dog and putting him in as close of a hunting environment that's not a hunting environment, and challenging him in what you're utilizing and taking and using the dog for what he's used to be done with, and it's not just test after test after test, AKC, whatever organization, and that's what resonated with me, is that we're actually going and doing, in a competition form, you're going and doing what all the things that you've taught your dog to do, and it's there are dogs that are taught to do things in this field of play that are just as drilled down as some of the other organizations in what they do with their dogs. It's just though that training method is geared in a way to take advantage of the rules and and do well in this game. You have I saw right now the dog that has won. I think he's the only dog that's ever won all 5 major field trials in our organization. And I watched the handler, because the handler needed a back and wanted a back, as he guided his dog in to perform a back. The dog went on point, and he was able to call his dog off a point and get the back.
And then go back to the bird.
Right, and it's that type of training that goes into the high level training that goes into this game. It's fascinating. What some of these guys can get their dogs to do.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we were talking a little bit about this last night while we are staying up too late chatting dogs. Is this is a very general statement. I'm painting with a broad brush here, but generally speaking, I would say that, like, if you're wanting that companion dog, that obedient dog, look towards the hunt test, whether that's NAVDA, AKC, what have you. The emphasis on obedience is there. But if you're wanting a just bird finding machine, a little rough around the edges, you can probably, generally speaking, put good obedience on them, because to your point, there are some dogs out here with quality obedience and everything. That's like the trial dogs, right? And as I kind of, I don't know, flush out some new areas with these dogs, I'm kind of realizing that each one, each organization and circuit, if you will, kind of has its own flavor of type of dogs,
Sure.
right? Like
Right,
it's
right.
very similar on. You look over here at a UFTA, like those dogs at the top, like they're really impressive, but they all kind of reflect one another in some way, shape, or form. Same thing in NASTRA, same thing in NAVDA. It's just really interesting to where if you don't really go and explore each one, I think that we're leaving a lot of meat on the bone out there on a number of different breeds.
Sure.
It's not just. I think a lot of people think that it's just pointers or setters out here, but there's a ton of short hairs. I think I've seen wire hairs. Brittany's are really
French
common.
Brittany was
Yeah.
here today.
Yeah, so I mean, you do have a nice, healthy variety, if you will. But you're talking about, again, your journey of, you learned a lesson right out of the gate. You forewent some of the foundations. You put the foundations on, and here you are. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were a high point dog this year, weren't you?
Yes, my male has one high point dog in our region, for the Georgia region of NASTRA. He has.
And what does that afford you other than maybe bragging rights, right?
It allows you to if you want to participate in some of those national trials, he qualifies with the point system, not just winning that title, but the points that he's earned. And he is like Eric. He's a point away from getting his first national title. He got his amateur title championship this year. My female got her amateur championship, and we hadn't spent a lot of time on that. Not only do we have the mentorship, but we have an amateur program that entices people to come back out. It gives them rewards as an amateur dog.
It's a foot in the door. That's what I've been running, right?
Exactly.
Like,
Correct.
it doesn't have anything to do with the age of your dog, like a lot of other organizations. It's really just, it's a way to get people's foot in the door, get their experience, build up some confidence and comfort zone, and then kind of go play. And my first trial was an open,
Right.
but I ran as an amateur dog in the open. So it's not like you have to pick either or to where you can go to just an amateur only trial,
Right.
right? Like, you're still running as an amateur dog in an open, so you're kind of double dipping it a little bit.
You do.
Right.
You do.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can place, if you were to win, have the highest score that day, you can get an open first and an amateur first, or any other combination like that. So
So I'm assuming that this is just like any other organization, to where you guys are just trying to get some new blood in it here, just trying to get some new people involved. I mean, it just seems like no matter where you go, every organization and every facet is the same thing. It's like we need newer guys, we need younger people. It's like the old guard that you were referencing earlier. A lot of those guys are ready to kind of hang their boots up, or at least just go back to having fun and playing the game again,
Yep.
and hand off some of the responsibility to the younger chaps. And I think that really, as I've kind of explored different areas, there's a healthy there's a healthy kind of younger demographic within this. At least the trials that I've been to. Yeah, there's some older people, but there's still other guys our age. I don't know if we still consider ourselves young or not.
Right.
But yeah,
I'll be 50 in a couple of weeks. So I'm definitely not young.
yeah, but that kind of goes to my point, to kind of reiterate it, is when we're talking about like 40 to 50-year-olds being younger in this space,
Right.
we do have to get other people involved in this.
Oh yeah, and that's the big thing we've been pushing with them. And most of those people coming in are going to be amateurs, and so that we've had some amateur only trials this year, trying to kind of lower the barrier of entry, trying to get them involved. But yeah, that's
And
that's
has it
why
been
we called
successful?
you. I mean, that's why. But yeah, that's I mean, we definitely see that, and we do have several younger guys. We keep picking up a few every year, but yeah, we definitely need some.
It seems like it's successful, though. I mean, just
Yeah.
from just me looking on the outside, it seems like y'all are getting some fresh blood in here and livening things up a little bit. Not
Yep.
that it was dead before,
Yeah.
but in regards to the older guys, there's still a place here, because I think something that's very unique to NASDRA that we have to touch on, because there's a give and take on this. Is Eric probably knows where I'm going with this. The At first, the optics of this kind of took me aback a little bit. When you come out and you may look out at a brace and you see not only the judges on four wheelers, but you're seeing the handlers on four wheelers or UTVs, right? At first, it kind of was like, what is this? Right? And it just, the optics of it and the first impression. But when you start really thinking about it, it not only helps the old guard and keep those guys active and included, and
Or
keeps
somebody
them
with a
off.
handicap.
That's where I'm going.
Right.
Handicap, wounded soldiers, what have you, is there's a way to where, I mean, there's a guy in a wheelchair out here today participating.
Was 14 years old when he lost his leg to cancer, and he found a place in NASTRA years ago, and he's been running in NASTRA 20 plus years probably.
Yeah.
And that's, we give variances to ride on vehicles to people with whether it's health issues or mobility issues or a handicap, or
At the end of the day, it's trying to keep people involved and a way to enjoy what we all love to do, regardless of handicap, age, element, whatever.
right.
But I think it is important to note that again, the optics of it. When I first go out there, I'm like, what is this? Because there was one brace in particular. It wasn't just the handlers. You had one guy that had a gunner for him too. And then he had four wheelers. So they were like 5 or 6 4-wheelers and side by sides all on the same brace. And you hear this, and I'm like, whoa, this is a little different. But when you kind of break it down and the why behind it, it's hard to argue with
Right.
it, right? It is giving people, and I think, Eric, you said it best, is like it gets people off the couch
Right.
and out here. And it's not a competitive advantage. Again, y'all figured out a way around this to work
They
with
limit their
everybody.
speed, so
Right.
There's a governor on it to where, I mean, I think I walk faster than some of these four-wheelers and side by
What
sides.
does that though speak to the quality of dog that has to overcome all those different obstacles
Yeah.
in the field of hunting? He's got all these four wheelers around him. He's got people walking around him. He's got all this. They all lay different scents down in the area that they're trying to hunt in. So that, I think that speaks to the caliber of dog that it's required to participate. Or it says a lot about the dog and his ability to continue to do his work with all that going around him.
Yeah, and it's just another distraction at the end of the day. And we got helicopters flying all over us. We
Speaking of
got four wheelers,
distractions.
dogs, helicopters. Yeah, speaking of distractions, it's just part of it, right? You know, it just gives me a challenge on the editing bay here. But at the end of the day, it is just another distraction. And so, like, you know, I was telling my buddy Randall, you know, he came out a few weeks ago and ran his first NASTRA trial. And, you know, when I first gave him the heads up about, like, hey, you might show up and there's, you know, your brace mate's on a four wheeler or side by side, his initial reaction, I don't want that. I don't want it. And I explained it to him, and especially with him, you know, and being in the Army and wounded veterans and stuff like that, he was like, oh, well, that makes sense. So, like, again, it's important to know. That's why I wanted to throw it out there to where, like, again, it looks goofy. You may not like it initially. It was a little bit cringe, to be perfectly honest, on my first thing. But then you start to thinking about it, and it's like, man, like, we talk about getting people involved and the inclusion of this to where that doesn't matter about your physical ailment. Like, you guys will figure out a way to allow people to use this, and other organizations do the same thing with those tracks, wheelchairs, and stuff like this. But this is just kind of another light of that.
Right, right.
Let's get into some of the fun, man. Let's talk about the stories and you know, big wins. I mean, so far, I mean, it sounds like, Adam, like you came into this hot and heavy, and you found
Well,
success. And
You want something funny? I'll tell you the funniest thing that's happened to me. Actually happened on the first trial that I ever attended, and my wife and I were staying at a hotel just south of Atlanta. It was we usually run 2-day trials, Saturday and Sundays, and we were staying at a Hampton Inn. And when we decided to go to bed, our dogs were in the room with us. My male dog starts whining, and I'm like, go to bed, lay down, you know, and he wouldn't stop whining. So I took him out into the hallway, and he had the most explosive diarrhea. It's like 400 pounds of psi coming out of that dog. We clean that up. We get him outside. He uses the bathroom. Needless to say, he does it twice again, but in the bedroom, in the hotel room that we're staying in. He does it twice, and I finally put him in the dog kennel. I was worried about something happening to him in the dog kennel, theft or mischief or something going on. So I finally put him in the dog kennel. I go downstairs around 5:30 or so to check on him. I let him out, and he's just jumping around, happy as can be. Well, I had told my wife that I was pulling him for the trial, that we're going to go home, that, you know, we didn't sleep the whole night, whatever. That I see that he's okay and fine, and I go back upstairs, and to the dismay of my wife, I tell her that we're gonna go trial. You know, she was not happy at all.
she thought Mom was going home.
Oh yeah. Well, he goes out in the second brace on the Sunday. He has a 6. I think I missed a bird, or maybe 2 birds I missed. And my second miss was in front of the gallery, and it was in front of the field, and there was a lot of people up there, and they all moaned when I missed the bird, and he goes over and that was his 5th bird, and he goes over and finds the 6th bird, and he won the first place open placement on the field and first place amateur. So that was the taste of success that I got early on, where he went out and ran big, but at that time he was still in one of the sitting president now, Bob Stapleton. He said to me early on when he saw my dogs, he said, what I like about your dogs is that when they go off the line, the starting line, he said they're hunting immediately. He said, my dog just runs big, da-da-da-da-da. Well, that's where I handled my dog into. And that's where he started missing birds and all the things, because he had that early success, and I was like, oh, I've got the dog, we can, and I went along attending a lot of field trials where he didn't place. He didn't have this success, and it was my fault, and I had to realize that I had pushed him into a place. So that was a funny little my first time.
You almost went home and missed out on
Yeah,
your big
yeah,
run.
yeah. So
What about you, Eric? When did it start clicking for you to where you're like, all right, I cannot, I'm not only just doing this, but I can be competitive because, yeah, I mean, you won one the first weekend I was here, the first trial. I think you won that one.
Yeah, I did. I mean, my dog isn't the best bird finder when it's hot, so I kind of struggle some with where I get braced or but
Is this fin or trout?
trout.
Okay,
So
the short hair.
get the short hair, yeah. So but I remember he's back to what Adam was talking about earlier in the steadiness. He probably isn't all the way now, but I like my dogs to be steady to shot. So especially on a rainy day, they have a little more leeway in there. And so one of his first placements, or I think it was first placement, it was a rainy day. A lot of dogs have been disqualified, but he was he was running against another short hair that was pretty big running, and that dog ran to the back of the field from the get go, and my dog was able to stay up front and find four birds, boom, 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 and then we went back to the back and found another bird. So we had a 5-bird run, and yeah, that was a pretty memorable day to me. I'd probably come to 3 or 4 trials or so when that happened. So, but I remember I think the first time I ran was here at Ball Ground, and I had I think I got an amateur placement on one of the fields or something that day. So, I mean, a lot of it's finding early success, but to me, a lot of it's the people. Half the reason I come is just to stand around and talk to people about bird dogs. I mean, I don't have anybody in my family or my friend network that really I can talk to them about. And then, I mean, most of my friends are here now, so I mean that's
I have a large network, but I don't have anybody like close. So it's nice to find others, southeastern guys that can play games and talk bird dogs all night, right?
oh
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's just fun being around people that have a shared passion. But what both of you guys said is like you found early success that hooked you, and not that you have to like win a trial to have fun. Like I haven't won a trial yet, but as you like I haven't lost a trial
yeah,
yet
yeah,
either. I've come
yeah.
close. Like I think I've gotten a second, a couple thirds. Like I've come close. Like today, man, like that run, it's still
Yeah.
you're actually out there walking with me, and it's just like, man, it was so close to all
Oh
coming
And
yeah.
you
together
you
today.
were competing in our amateur championship trial, end of
Yeah.
the year amateur championship trial. Your dog performed well enough to qualify for that, and now you're out here. Your dogs are very competitive and really good dogs, and
Yeah,
they can play this game.
I'm looking forward to getting Quinn out here soon. I mean, I'm gonna finish up force fetch with her and get her going. But I was just telling him I'm kind of curious to run Lucy in here a few times just for the heck of it. Closer working dog. I think she'll get knocked on points with her style, especially with her on pen raised birds. But I would be interested to just see how it kind of fleshes out for the heck
I
of it.
think you should. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it'd
just
be fun.
I think it'll be fun. But yeah, I mean, either way, it's like again, you find early success. It's gonna kind of give you that push, that nudge to keep going. But you don't have to come out here and win the trial to feel that,
No,
right?
No.
Like I would say unless you come out and your dog just has like your brace started the downpour today, and like if you're coming out to a trial, just know like unless it's a complete thunderstorm, bring some wet weather gear.
Right. Right.
You're running in the rain, and there were three did not finish on that sheet today, and that was on your brace, and then I ran right after you, and that was my brace mate. To where again, what we were talking about earlier, your dog catches two birds, you're going to get picked up, but that I mean. You were going in a downpour. Like it was cats and dogs, frog
Right.
choker, whatever you want to call it. And so, you have to train in
Exactly.
those scenarios because you have no idea what's going to happen on trial day. And what's funny is your dog got picked up on your initial one in the downpour, right?
Right.
Like that brace was just ugly. Both dogs got picked up. It is what it is. Well, my next brace, my brace mate gets picked up, and Eric jumps out with his dog that just got picked up as the buy dog. and then his dog's out there trying to take the mantle from Rachel. Right? It's like he completely forgot what he had just done like 10 minutes earlier, and next thing you know, he's finding and pointing birds, and Rachel got a nice back off of him, and I'm like, all right, I see Eric's strategy here. He just wanted to try and knock me out here.
Yeah, because I had something to gain by that.
But it's like, unless your dog goes out there and just rips two birds right out the gate, you're gonna experience it and have fun.
Oh yeah,
Right? You're gonna have enough to where, like, maybe you don't find the success, but it's enough to say, oh, I want to try this game a couple more times.
right. Yeah, we talked about before. I mean, a three bird run's a very respectable run. You usually you beat your brace mate in the bird count. But I mean, that's something to shoot for. And a lot of times, a three bird run will place you in the amateur stakes. But yeah, I mean, even if you come out here and find one or two birds, I mean, that's no big deal. But I mean, you find success, have a three bird run, then you can work on getting a placement and moving on from there.
Well, because of the dogs that didn't place for ripping a couple birds today, one guy made the cut just because of a backing score. He
Right.
didn't even find a bird in his run.
Right.
And so some people, they might go out there and just have that run to where it's like they don't find a bird or retrieve, and then they just go home. And it's like, no, you actually make the cut to move
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
right? You have no idea what's going to happen after you. To reiterate something that was said earlier, the sending conditions are changing throughout the day.
Right.
And as well as throughout the year. So if your dog isn't doing so hot in September, October, but maybe, in January, February, your dog has a better chance. So, all we're saying is, again, don't be afraid to come out here, and we encourage you to come try things. I think a lot of people are afraid to try new things and new systems out of fear of looking bad or
Right.
unsuccessful. And it's just like, everybody has those days to where you're winning trials and you got picked up today, right? That's going to happen
Yep.
if you do this long enough. I'm waiting on it to happen to me, and I'm going to be like, all right, well, that was a wake up call. But I think that the right rewards and the right checks and balances, if you will, from my perspective, I've really kind of been enjoying this journey, testing it out.
Well, good. Good.
I appreciate you guys inviting me. I know we're out here drinking beer and talking, NASTRA and educating people, but everybody else is inside eating dinner and everything.
I think they already ate, actually. But
They already ate without us.
Yeah.
That's how it is. So, I mean, anything else like that you think we should touch on
I think,
before?
yeah, if you're going to come to a trial, reach out to your region president or somebody. That way they know you're coming, and you can introduce yourself, and they can kind of show you around. Don't just pull up and wonder where you're supposed to be and stuff like that. Just if you want to, I'd recommend reaching out. And also, you don't have to run your dog the first time. You can come out and just watch, see how things go. And like a 2-day trial, if you don't want to run 2 days, just run 1 day. I mean, there's no requirement that you have to run 2 days. The end of the year, the regional, it's a 2-day deal. But every other trial throughout the year is just a 1 day.
The price of the trials, is that dictated by headquarters or
No,
each
by,
region?
by each region.
Okay.
And a lot of that, and so the judges and the bird planner do get paid in this. So that's where a lot of your money's going. A lot of times we have to pay for our trial grounds, and if we have to pay for any like hotel rooms or travel expenses for our judges. And then we pay like a sanctioning fee to the
Because at least down here, I mean, obviously we can't speak to all the regions, but down here, I mean, the price to run in this trial is really reasonable, in my opinion, to where you're talking about a half an hour with a potential opportunity at 5 birds. Yeah, you don't have an e-collar, so you're not really training, but if you come out here with that training mindset, I could argue that go buy 5 birds to train on somewhere else with the grounds out here, with a brace mate, with all of the distractions. I would argue it's a very good training opportunity.
I agree.
If you just look at it that way, even maybe you don't have any interest in winning or competing, but it's just like, hey, I just want to run on new grounds against other dogs.
Want somebody to put the birds out for me?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a worse place to hang out all day than here,
Yeah.
right? Like
That's right.
And another thing is, depends on where you're drawing. You don't have to devote all day to it. A lot of times you've got to be there for your braces, but a lot of depends, especially how many dogs you're running. But if you're running just one dog, a lot of times you may only have half the day basically tied up in it. So if you're traveling and stuff, there's more to it than that. But and especially we're doing more of the it's a mixed trial where we have 12 braces of open amateur and then 4 braces of amateur only. So if you're running in the 4 amateur only braces at the end, you don't really need to show up till about 2 o'clock ish or so. So you don't have to. You can go do something with your family in the morning, and show up in the afternoon and run your dog.
And I can't speak for other regions, but for what we do, we did it last year and we'll do it again this year. Is we're gonna have a fun day, kind of an educational, introductory day to what NASTRA is, uh, the ability for those people to come out and run their dogs and have a judge walk with them or a mentor walk with them and kind of teach them what our what NASTRA is all about and the rules and just to get your feet wet, just to learn about it, just the introductory type day. Um, and we're also looking for people that may not have a dog that want to do judging, that wants to be involved in something and wants to judge.
Yeah, like Stan, he doesn't even run. He doesn't
No,
even have
yeah,
his dog.
no,
He just
two
he
two of
just
our
enjoys
judges.
the networking, the
Yep,
hanging out with people, the judging of dogs. I think he said last time I was talking to him, I think he said his son still does it or did at one
yeah.
point.
His sons have ran some dogs. His sons have judged some, but yeah,
But yeah, it's like you don't have like maybe you just enjoy coming out here and watching dogs, but your lifestyle doesn't warrant owning a dog, right? You
right.
could still be involved and I think every trial I've been to, there's been at least one or two women handlers out there being competitive,
yes,
just as much as anybody else for anybody, any of the women listening like this is just as welcoming for
Absolutely.
you as the men. Uh, and then also I enjoy going into environments to what you touched on it earlier. This is just bird dog stuff. The vast majority of people here are bird hunters. And so it's like you're not just talking trial, you're not just talking the game. You're also talking hunting, trips, planning, your last season, this upcoming
oh yeah.
season, gear, the same tailgate talk anywhere else that you're going to find. And so, we're going to kind of close on this, Adam. Where are you going out west for the first time, and what are you chasing? Because I know we've talked about this, where so you're like, man, I got to get out west. You haven't experienced the
Sure.
wild bird hunting
I,
yet,
you know,
but
it depends on who I go with and what they know, I guess, who invites me.
so you're just tagging along for the
Exactly,
ride.
exactly.
Smart man,
Yeah,
smart
yeah.
man. Is there something that does intrigue you more so than the
I
others?
think I was talking. There's a gentleman that is very entrenched and has done it for years and years and wrote books. And his name's Randy Schultz. And I was talking with him today, and I kind of posed the same question to you last night: is what's your favorite bird to hunt? And I asked Randy, and
Compare and contrast. I want to hear his answer
he,
compared to mine.
it was totally night and day.
All
So
right.
you enjoyed the rough grouse. Was your what I believe it was the woods as far as the challenge.
The challenge and the
Right.
chess match
Right.
for pure fun.
Yes.
The prairie birds.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he's a desert guy.
Okay.
He
I can see that.
he loves the desert. And I'm sitting there listening to he was having a conversation with another guy and I've never really wondered where these birds come from and the chucker. The chucker comes from Istanbul, I think Turkey, I believe. I may be wrong, but they were talking about the chuckers where they're found in the United States, and that intrigued me to go find some chucker. That sounds challenging. I've done an elk hunt. What I thought it was going to be, I prepared a year to do this elk hunt, and it lasted 30 minutes. but
Good problem to have.
Oh yeah, yes, very rewarding.
How long did the pack outlast though?
Well, not long at all because we had a Toyota truck that we could drive
Oh,
up to.
okay, so
We
you
did-
really are cheating. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, we actually walked up to our first knoll, and I noticed an elk, and the guy was like, "Hey, there may be more with him. Let's back up." And he went and looked, and there was a better bull with this younger bull, and I had a chance to harvest the animal, and it was a lot of fun. But it was not I didn't pack. We didn't pack in, and it was fun though. It was my first and only elk hunt so far. And I want to do something different that's more challenging, and reaps a bigger reward in the chucker. Him talking about where the chucker are, and having to really work for the bird. It sounds fun.
Chucker's cool, man. I've only done it early season. I've got to try it late season because I mean snow and at that elevation and stuff like that is just got to be a completely different challenge.
Yep.
But yeah, it's it might be a cop out when some people ask me, they're like, well, what's your one choice? I'm like, man, it depends. Like every different strokes for different folks, right? Like some people really enjoy the chess match and the strategic element of a hunt and the challenge of it and the fulfillment of it. Other people just want to go out and see their dogs point birds and shoot some birds,
That's right.
right? I'm kind of guilty. Like it depends on my mood. Like I can go for all of it. But if you held a gun to my head, then it's just like, yeah, rough grouse. Like it just to me, like that's the epitome of a dog that can consistently properly handle rough grouse
Mhm.
in the north woods, and then especially down here in the southeast, where we're in Georgia. North Georgia has some birds. East Tennessee has some birds. You can really embrace the suck and go after them if you want. You just said that you might appreciate the challenge. That's a challenge that I can point you to. I've done it myself. But yeah, you really gotta want it. And so to me, like just the struggle bus of the rough grouse kind of took that over the edge on mine. It's interesting that Randy said the desert birds because I did Arizona. I can see that. To me, man, prairie birds.
He brought up prairie birds as well. That was his second, but his
Yeah,
the
I think a lot of it has to do with the early season. You've been wanting it all year long. You're waiting for it, and then it's finally there. You're out there on the prairie. To where desert, don't get me wrong, it's a blast. Especially, the gambles are running. They'll piss you off because they just don't stop running unless you find them in the right cover. But yeah, it's just fun comparing and contrasting because yeah, I've listened to Randy's audiobooks and just the fact that he's traveled more than I have, honestly, but I've done my fair share of traveling. It's funny kind of
right.
comparing the two on Eric, where are you going this fall?
I don't know. I'm thinking. I really want to do like a Montana or Wyoming trip. I've been putting in for some pronghorn points in Wyoming. I'd like to do a combination pronghorn sage grouse hunt, but there's some because of drought and stuff. I don't think they're giving out as many pronghorn tags, so I haven't looked into that this year.
And that thing called, I think, a third child
Yeah,
coming
I kind of keep forgetting about that, but I'm hoping I can make
along. I'll dub that out so you don't get in trouble.
I hope I don't know. I've been doing week-long trips, but I'm think I'm gonna try two like long weekend trips this year. Maybe one to Michigan. I've been kind of thinking about Nebraska. I've been to Kansas a couple times. May go back there.
Those weekend trips can be tough when you live in central Georgia.
Yeah,
It's not really
yeah,
conducive
yeah.
for road trips.
No, they're not. They're
Not that I'm that much better off in
Yeah,
Tennessee, but
but
I still get to knock off,
you don't have to
5
drive through
hours.
Atlanta. Man, that's worth a couple points there.
Yeah, Atlanta. That's 8 hours worth right there.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, we say all this to again reiterate that we're outdoorsmen, we're sportsmen, we like dogs, we enjoy different aspects of what brings us to the table on this. But at the end of the day, the common thread and element are the dogs in all of this, and I think that NASTRA epitomizes that just as much as any other fill in the blank organization. I think every single thing has pros and cons, and if anybody's listening to this that wants a new challenge, wants a new experience, just wants to experience something new and have some fun, come out, try it out, reach out to your local region, go to your point, whether you even have a dog or not, go just watch a trial and take it all in for what it is, because it is fun to where we're nerding out on a bunch of dog training stuff, but there's a lot of old timers here with a lot of quality information.
Sure.
It may not be as I don't know, new or as enlightening as some of the other theories or concepts out here, but there's a lot of knowledge to be gleaned off of these guys that have found success for 40 years. I was looking at some of them. I think Ricky was on the trophy in there from like 1980 or something,
Wow.
He's
and
been doing a
then
long
just
time.
last year was on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like So you're talking about a guy that's been doing it for 40 years, pretty much on
Yep.
this. I
Right.
mean, there's a lot of info. You don't stick around and you're not that consistent without something to bring to the table.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right.
Anything else to add before we wrap this up and go eat ourselves?
I think you covered it.
All right.
Appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, thank
spending
you.
time with us.
I enjoyed it, man. Of course, I'll be back, and next year we stick to the plan to where we actually win the trials before doing the
That's
podcast.
right.
There you go.
That's right.
There you go.
Appreciate it, guys.
All right.
Thank you.